It began a year ago when the so-called free speech advocates, who in truth have no appreciation for freedom, were allowed to assault and humiliate the symbol of law and order, a policeman on the campus, and that was the moment when the ringleaders should have been taken by the scruff of the neck and thrown out of the university once and for all.
On May 15th, 1969, a battle over freedom and community took place in Berkeley, California. Hundreds fought bravely for a small piece of utopian paradise.
It hasn't been documented properly, the history. Obviously, the birth of People's Park had its issues.
People's Park was born in April of 1969. Few Berkeley residents decided to clean up an abandoned lot owned by the University of California. Their vision was to create a place for everyone to enjoy, a park created for the people, by the people.
The University of California had no particular plans for this plot of land not far from Dwight Way off Telegraph Avenue. So we were trying to defend the assertion of a community to determine its own spaces, to be our own kind of fool and create a space which was an open, a creative commons for people to plant gardens, to furnish outdoors, to give a sense that there was one place in Berkeley that didn't belong to a landlord. It belonged to us.
But in Berkeley and around the country, there's been a decline in community involvement. In the 45 years since People's Park, community space has become dried up.
The events of People's Park are the same kind of struggles we're seeing today. The struggle to reclaim public space. And public spaces are disappearing. And I found that there was a real desire for people to have a strong sense of community and connection. And the physical spaces, the places they lived, and the places they worked helped to form those kinds of bonds. When we moved to the Bay Area, we decided that we were going to rent, and we found really cute places that had garden spaces. And when we found this place, we weren't intrigued so much by the house and the property. It was actually not that attractive, which is why we couldn't afford it. It was covered in concrete, and there were walls, there were fences all around the houses. And our vision was to take all the concrete out, which we did, slowly.
Tendai shared a similar vision as the pioneers of People's Park. Hundreds of people ripped up concrete, cleared ground, planted flowers and grass. Others set up playground equipment, cooked meals, and played music. Berkeley citizens of all walks of life came together, not only to build People's Park, but to build a community.
There are many ways to forge a community. The conventional way to think of a community is via geography, or perhaps a workplace community. But in Berkeley, in the 70s, we were trying to construct a different kind of community, a community that was united on the basis of common interests and common passions.
The community enjoyed People's Park for weeks. However, on May 15th, 1969, a fence rose around the park. The University of California was taking its property back.
What had happened is that the University of California, in an effort to preserve its property rights to the area known as People's Park, had set up a chicken wire fence approximately 8 feet tall around the entire site.
More than 3,000 protesters came together and rallied against the fencing and proposed destruction of People's Park. They attempted to tear down the fence while throwing bottles and rocks at law authorities.
But lo and behold, we get there and there's 50 people climbing up the fence, trying to pull it one way, trying to push it down another way. I and my students felt that we needed to be a part of this moment in history. And so we grabbed that fence and we started tugging and we started pushing.
2,000 National Guard troops were sent to Berkeley to combat protesters. Tear gas, nightsticks, and shotguns were fired. People call that day Bloody Thursday.
It was last May when this piece of Berkeley real estate was dubbed People's Park, and the controversy over its future use escalated into open street warfare, with armed troops and tear gas spraying helicopters overhead. When the battle was over, there was one dead, one blinded, scores injured and arrested.
Most of all, it's been a free space, but we also have a situation where people don't like to fight. People are afraid of police, people don't like tear gas, and fighting is a frightening thing. But people are very committed to this park and feel that they will do whatever they can, whatever their skills and abilities allow them to do, whatever their commitment allows them to do, to defend the park. We want to avoid a confrontation.
And eventually, after about half an hour or an hour of this, now in the darkness, the fence came down with a giant clatter. And suddenly, there was no more fence around People's Park.
We got to know our neighbors, and as the fences started to wear out, we decided to experiment with taking the fence down. It didn't end up that we had more conflicts or that there were any kind of problems we might have feared would be created. It was actually a very positive experience. And my neighbors had 2 kids, and the kids were very excited. So we decided to replace the fence with a chicken coop that we share. And so we co-parent 4 sets of chickens. And that's been incredibly rewarding.
Community is kind of like a family. We have times we really get together and times we really don't. Obviously, the birth of People's Park had its issues, but now I think that things are, at least we're trying to work together. And hopefully those bad aspects of the birth of the park don't affect what's going on now. I think that everybody's trying to at least respect each other's vision. I think all of us want the best for the park.
People's Park will always be regarded as the founding father of community gardens. The park opened people's mind to the idea of public space.
And what we saw at People's Park was just that, people wanting a space that was positive for the community's voices and voices of dissent with the status quo.
So similar to People's Park, which was government, owned property that was being used and that wasn't being maintained, we've been able to take advantage of this unused space that's owned by the city, and we partner with them to turn into something positive for the community.
I think the People's Park campaign was indeed a forerunner to the green guerrillas, to the urban gardening movements, to the prison gardening movements, to the places where people want to assert a garden as not just a place to grow vegetables, but a place to unite people in a common cause. I think People's Park had something to do with that.
The mission of OBUGS is cultivating healthy kids. So these are kids that don't have a lot of time and experience and just opportunity to be out in nature. A lot of them live in apartment buildings, a lot of them don't have yards, and so the goal of the program is to bring nature to them.
Cultivating food and community through the use of public space has the ability to cultivate good habits in younger generations. Much like the youth involved in creating People's Park, the youth of today have something to learn from the community space also.
It's like people remember those experiences because they're not just sitting there listening to something, they're out, they're feeling the sun on their face, they're feeling the dirt. And I mean, with community gardens, you're part of a community, you're part of something larger than yourself.
Tom Hayden called America's People's Park as the very first liberated zone. And the communities it inspired will forever be an oasis amid our busy cities. Will people tend to and fight for them in the future?
The fact that that battle was won, and won time and time again, until the university gave up and acknowledged this was a public space for the people of Berkeley, that was our victory.
45 years later, citizens come together to celebrate the essence of the space. They bring new people to the park and share the spirit with them. The foundation that People's Park created can be seen in communities today. The group advocating for public space may be different, and the process of creation may have changed, but the ideals and motivation remain the same.
The long-term effects, though, of the demonstrations at People's Park were to help us understand what it takes to bring people together and create a new kind of society, a society built on shared ideals, not on consumption, not on a workplace, not on a geographical site, but on a place where people were sharing their ideals.